I'd like to call this meeting to order, a meeting of the Committee of the Whole on Monday, November 1st at 6 p.m. at the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. It can also be accessed via WebEx. Roll call shows all members present except for Trustee Baum, who I believe will be joining us shortly. I don't think I don't remember seeing anything, so I imagine he'll be joining us shortly, or we'll maybe perhaps see him at the village board meeting. So at this time, we'll wait and see. Next item on the agenda are the minutes from the October 13th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the 2022 recommended budget. Before we get into item A, we'll turn the meeting over to Matt to give us any updates or additional information or anything that he'd like to update this body on in regards to the budget. Matt or Steve?
I just had a couple of comments before Matthew walks through some of the information that he handed out, the packet, but this is the last scheduled Committee of the Whole meeting that the Village Board has on the calendar at this point before budget adoption on November 15th. The budget has been published according to state statutes with intended adoption on November 15th. On that day, there will be an official public hearing along with board action on the budget and the levy. One thing that I would suggest or recommend or possibly request from the village board is that if there are changes in addition to those or actions that the board has taken to this point, you could bring those up this evening and make your motions and look at those possible changes to the budget at this point. Can do that through statutes and village processes on Monday the 15th, and if that's something that happens, it certainly is something staff will work with. However, it does at times, depending upon the complexity of the change that you're making, create some challenges. If there are things that haven't been brought up in previous meetings or are a little bit more complex, since we do need to adopt the budget on the 15th, it does mean that we may have to do some things on the fly, and it just does increase the opportunities or the chances for some errors or complications in the process. So I guess my request and recommendation to the board is if you do have items that you're considering changing, if you could bring those up this evening, then it would give us an opportunity to, as staff, to double check the numbers before budget adoption and make sure that everything adds up the way that it needs to. That I'll pass the microphone over to Matthew. He can.
Good evening. Before you have a short packet titled 2022 Recommended Levy Overview. What I wanted to do with this packet is provide you a comprehensive look at the tax rate and the property tax levy for the village. Looking at the first page, you'll see things that I presented before, assessed value both in 2020 and 2021 estimate, the net new construction and how the budget was constructed. As a reminder, the budget is constructed with the TID in levy, not the TID out levy. Below that, you'll see the property tax levy by fund as published in our hearing. Overall levy increases about $93,000 or 0.68%. In addition, since we've last met, other taxing jurisdictions have posted their recommended levy or recommended budget or have adopted a budget. So below you'll see the tax rates for each of the taxing jurisdictions. There are three different sections. One is as the recommended budget. first section. The second one is if the board chose to use the TID-in levy and what that would do to our rate. Then the third and final one is if the village decided to keep the levy flat and what that would. In those columns, you'll see the tax rates and how they compare 2022 to 2021. On the following page, you'll see how that affects different home values. Overall, be a decrease in tax dollars, regardless of the amount of levy regarding tax rates or tax levy.
Any questions? Okay. Recommendations? Mr. Kaminsky.
I mean, this looks even better than I thought it would, frankly. To be able to maintain the budget that we presented with the things we need and to see overall in Germantown, we're going to actually have a tax decrease is amazing. And I personally would not take anything else out of our budget because I know how lean it is to begin with, and I know how hard we worked on it. And the less than 1% that shows up here, to me, is worth it.
Other comments? Questions?
I mean, I know I said it before, but I'll say it again. With our taxes going up because of the school board, their budget, I mean, I would love us to either be at zero or even pass on some cost savings to our residents.
Since we last met, the school board had changed their budget. They have removed about $700,000 from their budget, so they'll actually have a budget decrease.
They're actually decreasing now. Wow. Okay. I'd still like to stay at zero.
So on the first example, on the first page, it says tax rate recommended budget. That's with the TID out?
Correct.
And then with the TID in, it is actually an increase of 0.18% based on the recommended budget. And at no levy increase, is that TID in or TID out?
Out. Levy flat compared $93,065.
That money would then could be used for other things, or that's just with it not being used at all? What are the benefits of that? And what are the negatives of that? Let's say selecting the last, keeping it flat, no levy increase, and removing the TID-in levy.
So there currently is no TID-in levy in the budget. Keeping the tax rate flat would require staff to reduce the fund levy by $93,000. And as a reminder, as we page of the packet I gave you, that property insurance savings that could be used to.
Just to add that, in essence, there are the three options here. One is, the first one, the TID-in, is what staff presented and ended process. Second, sorry, the recommended budget is what staff recommended. That increases the levy amount of net new construction less the TID construction. Second option would be if you added in the new construction, so increase the levy to the legal limit. The second option, the TID-in levy. Third option, no levy increase would be talking about keeping the levy increase at zero.
I'd like to make a motion to use those insurance insurance, the savings from the insurance or workman's comp, is that it? Yeah, to offset the increase in the levy of, is it now? 93,605, so we stay at 0.
Is your motion?
Yes.
You have a motion made. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Kaminsky.
I have a question. What would, what's the plan for the savings from the insurance at this point?
Page, I do have, I guess the most pressing one would be the first one was reduction in budget. I'll have to change, reduce those state payments. Just payment from the state. $1,000 would be used salaries continue. In negotiations, parking lot items, station,
Further discussion. Trustee Chan Miller.
I'm not sure if this is this is a discussion, and an update. We had a library board meeting last Wednesday, and when the budget came up, the budget was approved less $60,000 that was supposed to be used for, the fire suppression system. Library board didn't feel that it should come out of our savings. So we're $60,000 short to get the fire suppression system put in to the library.
That, yeah, that is correct. Met with Trustee Miller and village librarian, as well as our village library board member this morning. Since the library board did vote against using $60,000 fire suppression system in the library, the village board then would have two choices. One would be to replace the $60,000. You could do that with cash. That could be a use of the funds from the property insurance savings. You could do that with borrowing authority. The $60,000 match that was included in the recommended budget was borrowing authority, so we would issue bonds, or that would be part of our bond issuance. Or the third option for the village board would be to eliminate the project and not fund that project at this point. So those would be other options that would be available to the board on that item. There also are, just as an aside, a number of other parking lot issues that the village board did talk about at the last meeting, and I think we're looking to revisit, and we do have the police chief here to talk a little further about staffing and some of the questions up at the last committee, the whole meeting, regarding to staffing as it relates to the 2022.
Further discussion on the motion. See Rick Miller, did I see your hand up?
Yeah. For the property insurance savings, you have three items here. State aid payments, you said, has to be adjusted from our budget currently. So our budget is actually $43,000, $44,000 less than what our last committee of the whole meeting was. Is that right?
correct. This was the last committee of the whole meeting.
And if we don't use that money, where does it come out of? What would you have to reduce in order to offset that? Oh, yeah.
Probably take another look. Processing.
Further discussion? Motion is to present a zero levy increase. I too have proposed that and had supported it previously. I am still in support of it. It seems like other taxing bodies within this village or within the property taxes of residents and businesses within this village have found a way to lower their taxes significantly. The state, not the state, but the county, MATC, and the school board. And we're really showing the least amount of that increase. What I don't like to hear as a question from residents is you had surplus of money and decided to spend it in anyways. You always find a way to spend the money. You always find a way to spend the money. You never find a way to save it or to reduce our taxes. You always seem to find a way to spend that additional money. And I can't disagree with that. Over the last couple budget years, we have decided for various reasons that the board looked at and discussed and voted to vote in favor of to increase the levy to the limit on subsequent years, and that raised the taxes on residents because of other taxing bodies and some of the things that they had going on as well. I think this year is a good opportunity for us not to do that and to show that we are good stewards and are able to run a budget so that we have no increase on the levy. I agree with Trustee Pieper on this one, that we should present a 0% increase in the levy to the residents. And is it a perception thing? Sure it is, because that's the way they understand it, that we didn't increase their taxes at all. We can go through the differences of when it's all net out and what your taxes are going to be saved, so you really did have a reduction. That discussion, most people, they don't want to hear it. It gets a little bit too far into the weeds, and it still comes down to you increase the levy. You still increase the levy, and that's what really impacts the property taxes the most. And in this instance, I think we have an opportunity to be zero, and that's something we should consider. Further discussion? Trustee Hudson.
Are we able to come in flat and still repair the fire suppression system at the library?
Or you could take it out of surplus,
We funded out of the surplus from 2020.
Yes.
or you could take it out of reserves. There's a
And,
lot of
yeah.
options.
Reserves is not an option.
It's an option.
Not for that.
I'd like to make a motion to,
Motion to amend.
thank you, yes. To approve the zero increase levy and use $60,000 out of the reserves to pay the difference in the fire suppression system for the library.
I'll second.
Motion made in second. Please define reserves.
Excuse me, I apologize. The surplus from 2020.
Thank you. Is that still approval of the second?
Yep.
Okay, motion made to amend and seconded. Discussion on the motion to amend.
Does that leave us?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. What's our balance?
Where does that leave us?
The balance, the year-end surplus from 2020 was 267,000. To this point, the village board is using 100,000 of that for purchase of police squad cars. That leaves 167,000. So that would bring us down to a year-end balance of $107,000 approximately. And just to clarify the motion related to the property tax levy, the way that I'm understanding it is that the direction to motion is to direct staff to prepare the changes to the budget for adoption the November 15th meeting. I think statutorily the board will not adopt the levy until after the public hearing that takes place on the 15th. So I think the motion is still a valid motion, just to clarify for anybody who might be listening that not adopting the levy tonight, you're directing staff to make the changes that to happen on the 15th.
That's correct. Further discussion? Trustee Nyrider.
Thank you. Just one question. Why was this library board meeting so late and this came in at the nth hour?
Is there a microphone in front of you, Bill?
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I should get closer.
All right, I see it.
My question again is why was this first discovered at library board now at the nth hour when we're almost complete with budget, or was that their first chance that they?
That was actually my fault when we had adopted a budget, perhaps.
Okay.
I had met with Tricia and I had sent her the updated spreadsheet, forgot to include that 60,000. So that was my.
Fine. Thank you.
Further discussion, trustee Jan Miller.
And then we just had our library board meeting. We have it monthly, not bi-monthly, and that was last Wednesday. So,
And why did they choose to do that, trustee Miller?
because we have earmarked the fund, I call it the Ameritrade Fund. It's about $800,000. It's all the county money that we've been saving for expansion of the library. We don't want to touch it. All of the reason for the meeting this morning was to identify where the other monies were coming from to get the fire suppression for not only the village hall, but also the fire station number 2. And those were all provided by the village. It is a maintenance item, and we believe that it should be, all the maintenance should come out of the village. We're all one.
But originally it was in the budget. Why was it included in their budget if it's a maintenance responsibility of the village? Just as a cost center application, or is it truly part of their budget?
It is the it's not maintenance of the system, it is replacement of the system. It is a capital item. And there has been historically, the village has done different things with different capital projects related to the library. We did treat this one and this project in this budget similarly to the roof replacement at the library recently, where 50% of it was funded through the village capital budget, 50% was funded through the library building. So it is a policy decision that's before the board. Either method is acceptable. I do, after talking with Scott Anderson, the facilities director, earlier today, I do think it's important to complete the project. We do know that there are leaks within the system. Because of the structure of the library, it is difficult to maintain it. For example, we had similar leaks in Village Hall a couple of years ago, but we were able to access the system in the attic and identify leaks and repair them as necessary. In the library, that's much more challenging because some of the sprinkler systems are inaccessible. So if the leaks would worsen to the point where the nitrogen pump is no longer able to maintain pressure, it results in a failure of the system. And it's a concern. So I think staff recommends it go forward with the project. Library board has taken that action, that they're not, library board is not funding half of it through the building reserve. That does mean using some of the surplus from acceptable options as well.
Was there any discussion during the library board meeting of I don't, what comes to my mind is like, you're short-sighted. I mean, here the library was just paid off within the last year or so. You're looking to put in a second story, yet let's not protect it. It just, to me, seems kind of, I don't know, strange. And choosing not to spend $60,000 for what would be considered an insurance policy to make sure it doesn't burn, or have an uncontrollable fire, and say, well, now we feel that that's the village's responsibility, where before we've shared those types of costs. It just seems to me to be self-serving in order to protect the $800,000.
well, the other commitments that we were giving you the roof, is when I believe, you can correct me because I'm newer, but it might have been when the fund was still being funded by the county. It is no longer being funded. It's finite. And so it does turn out to be a win-win because we will be using that money for the expansion. So it reduces whatever the $800,000 of what the village would actually pay in for any expansion. So we are very concerned about the materials within the library, and we certainly don't want anything to happen. And the village already put it on the docket for, I should say the DPW has it slated for 2022. So
Now we know how the county was able to reduce some of their taxes. No longer supporting your public libraries.
yes.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. Trustee Baum, for your information, there is a motion on the floor currently to propose a 0% increase to the tax levy. And the sheet in front of you that says recommended, the stapled item, that would be the one to the bottom. The last of the proposals where it says no levy increase. And there's been an amendment made by Trustee Hudson to that motion to include, still at a 0% increase to the tax levy, but to pay for the $60,000 that are required for the library's portion of replacement of the fire suppression system, to bring that out of surplus revenues that were realized in 2021. That is a motion that we have before the floor.
2020, right?
2020.
2020.
Sorry, 2020, yes. Yes. To take the $60,000 that the library board decided not to use as their portion of the funding for the replacement of the fire suppression, and we would then add up and take it from 2020 revenue surplus. So that's the motion before us, and we're in discussion. So is there any further discussion on that motion to amend? No further discussion? Let's do roll call.
Trustee Hudson,
Aye.
Trustee Pieper,
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Myers,
Aye.
Trustee Nightrider,
Aye.
Trustee Baum,
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion? No further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Pieper,
Aye.
Trustee Nightrider,
Aye.
Trustee Baum,
Nay.
Trustee Hudson,
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky,
Nay.
Trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Myers,
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Anything else for update on property tax levy? No. And we can go to the next item, which is police staffing. Chief Snow.
Thank you. So I had come before you earlier just to talk about not only the staffing, but looking toward a new command structure in general. I guess just kind of to reiterate what I presented last time, where we're at, before I came forward to request the staffing, I looked at all options. And that meant, because the problem was, if you remember, for the last 20 years, we basically haven't increased our patrol. We've added SROs. We've added a new position in the Detective Bureau. So kind of troubleshooting that and saying, how do we get people back on patrol means you're pulling from those positions. The schools have gotten very accustomed to an SRO, and quite frankly, if you looked at what they're doing in the school this year in particular, it's mind-boggling. They are just very, very busy. If you look at what our detectives doing, they're telling me they need more detective positions to take out of the bureau to put back on patrol. We're not solving any of our problems. We're just creating problems in another area. That was the point where I said, it's time, we need more patrol. If you look at recently, Friday was a perfect example where we have the retail theft at Fleet Farm. You might have seen some of the details on Facebook. They pitches a gun underneath the car, and we have all 3 of our officers down there, along with officers from other agencies. And I certainly, I cringe when people kind of use an anomaly to prove the norm. And these aren't anomalies anymore, though. We're seeing too many of them too frequently. And quite frankly, I discussed it in public safety with the flock cameras over the last 2 weeks. We've had over 6 stolens reported. We recovered 3 of them, made arrests on 3 of them, which always branched into charges of possession of different types of controlled substances, intent to deliver, all kinds of warrants, all kinds of other issues, carrying concealed weapons. And those complaints are the ones that are just pulling our patrol basically from other areas of the village to address these issues. And it's taken a long time to get these things under control. I asked for those positions because we're really at the point where we need them. And I understand that it wasn't all going to happen at once. I get that. But even one position is huge for me, because what it allows me to do is increase my minimum staffing levels on second shift. So instead of saying every day we're going to have at least 3 officers and a supervisor, I can say we're going to have at least 4 officers and a supervisor. And I think when you get to the point where you have those sworn in place, then you can start looking at CSOs to even be more efficient in the use of our patrol and how we direct that patrol. But right now, I just think that we're at that point. The growth of the village, the growth of the building that's gone on, the commercial, the retail, has taken us to the point where it's this constant drain on our resources, that we're just really at that point where we need to start looking at increasing those sworn personnel, especially on patrol.
Question. So when you were proposing the change in staffing and kind of putting someone that's in control per shift, is that really more of an increase of 3 people, or is it just 1 person that allows you to get that type of staffing?
That for that command structure we talked about, and I think there's a way to do that with an additional body, but it doesn't really add any numbers. Then you're basically taking patrol, making them sergeants, which absolutely helps as far as the issue that we're having with the supervision, and not just relying on 6 people to provide that 24/7 supervision. So it certainly helps in that regard. But to be most effective, you do need, 3 bodies would certainly get us where that would be kind of my, I guess, ideal police department. And I certainly know that that's something that's going to take time to get there.
So I think the question's been asked before. What you mentioned a term, what is a CSO?
Community service officer, the agencies that use them, Menominee Falls uses them, West Bend uses them, and they can help with traffic control. Menominee Falls does allow theirs to issue more
Traffic tickets?
minor,
Speeding?
not things like that, but more minor municipal violations,
Parking?
dog at large type of issues like that.
Okay, but they're also helpful, from what I've seen, and if there's a traffic accident, they're able to set up blockade or whatever is needed, and that doesn't need an additional car to do that, because their vehicle or whatever it is, and that person can kind of set that area up, and it's not taking an officer away from that.
Yeah, they do use them a lot for traffic control, sure.
Are they on staff 24/7 or just during certain hours?
Menominee Falls, I believe it's during certain hours, and I'm not sure what it is with West Bend, but I know they use them pretty much in the same function.
But when we're looking at the budget and we have a number before us as to what it would take to add an officer, which is $118,000, what would it take to add a CSO? Is that half of that? Is that three-quarters of that? What is that?
And to be honest, I would have to go back and look at the numbers of that without having them.
Questions? Trustee Hudson?
So you've mentioned before that this is not a solve the challenges that we face today. What I'd help myself and others is where we are today and where we would like to be in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, so we can help overcome these challenges and we can map this out. I'd like to see something on paper that would help me understand the challenges that the department faces every day.
Yeah, and I think that model that I had before you last time was kind of where,
Where you want it to be in the future.
right.
Yeah.
And right now, I guess we're at the position where, like I said, one body allows me to increase staffing on second shift, but not a lot outside of that, but that's huge, quite frankly.
Could expand if Chief Snow's answer to that. I think the other thing, look at how to get from where we are today to where the police department would like to be. I think there's a few options, like we've done with the fire department the past few years. Did a position every year, upgraded some positions each year, get to to increase the staffing level. Second, probably be like a referendum. Higher package and looking to get it done all at one time. A vote of the public. Third option, I think that the board would have to some other alternate funding source. Maybe not directly related to the police department, but coming up with an alternate funding source that would free up tax levy. Something like the public fire protection system, a vehicle registration fee, or a transportation utility. Some things that some municipalities have been using to try to address these kinds of issues. So I think just try to bite off a little piece, a referendum or some kind of funding source.
Trustee Baum, do you have your hand up?
Sure. Chief Snow, can you send through that plan? You documented it somewhere, I just don't have it with me.
Sure.
Can you send that through again so I can refresh myself on it?
Absolutely.
I personally have been asking about how we get this in the budget since we've been talking. It doesn't sound like a 2, 3, 4-year plan is really going to work for you. You need these 3 additional people sooner rather than later, sounds like. So how do we go about expediting this? The only alternative I hear is a referendum, unless money's coming from somewhere else that I don't know.
I would say that for the levy limits that are in place in Wisconsin, there really is no way that you can accomplish all of this in 1 year unless it's an alternate revenue source like public fire protection or establishing a transportation utility registration fee. But otherwise, the levy limits just don't allow some funding to that kind of a jump up.
Referendum?
The wheel tax would be another word for it.
Wheel tax.
That goes over like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
That's why you said it the way you did.
Yeah, that's why if it's a referendum, you all vote for it, say in it. The total dollar value for the new plan that you want to get is 3 people, 3 at $118,000, 1 new vehicle, 2 new vehicles, all the gear. What's the total dollar value that?
For 3 people? If you're looking to add vehicles, I mean, how many additional vehicles would be needed? 1?
One for 3 additional officers, and
1 officer for each shift, 1 car for all 3 shifts. The way I'm understanding it.
Right, so that equals 1
Correct.
car.
Right. So we're looking at dollars?
450?
So talking about
318 times
360 roughly per year for salary and benefits, and now you have it, you know, the additional funds of equipment.
we had the vehicle cost at $70,000 for the vehicle to equip it. Equipment cost per officer is $9,000. Uniform cost per officer is $1,750. That uniform cost for the 3 could basically be covered under an existing line item that we have established in the budget. And I don't have the number of what we presented for the additional 3 officers in front of me.
Go ahead.
Maybe a month or so ago, I ran some numbers, just kind of state and the desired state. I came up with for count savings in those numbers were just based off the average salaries and benefits for patrol officers, and
So I need to come up with $225,000?
I have it at 255,000
55.
Plus a car.
plus the cars.
Car.
The cars not included.
So that's
210
for the cars and equipment.
Make it 400. I'd say 400 if you put 100 on 255, and then the rest of it was roughly $27,000 for equipment and another, I don't know, throw 10 on it for rounding purposes. And I think one of the things that we learned as a village and what we've done additionally is when this came up before us as a fire department issue and requiring more full-time firefighters and more people on call, not on call, but readily available at the firehouse 24/7. We did it in steps. We didn't do it all at once. I think it probably took probably about 5 years until we got where we were today. So I'm thinking that this is the same principle, and you add them year to year to year, and until you get up to the staffing that's allowable. But you can't do it in one jump because we can't increase the levy that much. Referendum and other taxing initiatives are not always favorable because you call it what it is, it's still a tax. So if you're going to increase or future budgets for the cost of an officer, I think that could be done or accomplished through the budget process and a give and take from other departments or other areas to help cover an officer's salary. But I don't think you can do it all in 1 year. I think right now we have a number before us of roughly 118,000. I don't know how firm that is. But it seems to be a number that's been acceptable and put before us even on this piece of paper. Right now, we're sitting at $107,000, I believe,
Yes.
from what was been left over from surplus. So is there a way to accomplish another $11,000 from somewhere for just this year, or?
Sorry to interject, but the $107,000 from the year-end surplus from 2020, I would not recommend using that for an officer because that's a one-time dollar. If the officer is gonna, that would not be a good match. I would recommend if you earn 7,000 remaining from the surplus, probably be used for one-time expenses.
Trustee Kaminsky.
This is why I didn't vote for zero budget. And I'm sure trustee Baum agrees with me. We have needs. We have lots of needs, and it's optics, it's smoke and mirrors to go zero. Oh, look at us, we're at zero. When anybody who even watches the news once a week sees what is happening with police forces everywhere. We're fortunate to be able to find people that want to work on a police force. Crime is up everywhere. We had the discussion about how our police force in Germantown has to patrol the interstate. This is a lot of work for very few people on staff. As Germantown, if you take a drive through the village, you see how we're growing. And this is one time, and you know how I am about never spend something that's not reoccurring as far as revenue. This is one time I would say take that $107,000 and grab our reserves, the additional 10 or 11 that we need, and fund a police officer. And that way, we know we need this person, and yes, we will budget this person's salary next year. This is one time I would want to hold our feet to the fire on this, rather than always talking, oh, you have such a hard job, oh, we have crime, criminal activity all over, and we're doing nothing as this village grows, and that disturbs me greatly. And this is the one time I would do this, because it would hold our feet to the fire to fund this officer next year.
We have added staff to the police department in previous years. Within the last 3 years, we've
Yes.
added staff.
That's correct.
So it's not like we're doing nothing. And Terry, I don't disagree with all your points. My question to one of your main points would be the difference of 0% to recommended budget. Does that cover the cost of an officer? That difference? So the difference of 0 to recommended isn't the cost of a full officer. It's partial but that was your argument, and that's why I'm putting it forward.
Let me clarify.
Okay?
I'm not saying we could afford the officer. I'm saying that's why I will never vote for a zero-based budget for the point of optics to our constituents. I won't do it. You look at the parking lot items, you look at what we need in this village. We should not be trying to fit something into this tiny little hole here when we know we have greater needs. We're a growing village. We have greater needs. Why do we have to do things for optics? Half a person, that's great. And maybe we should have increased the budget by a little bit more to afford the entire person.
I don't,
That's my point.
I
But I
don't
will
agree
not
with your
vote for a
optics
zero-based
argument.
budget for that reason.
I don't agree with your optics argument. I think that as anybody else, and as they've found their monies to cut their budgets, it's up to us to do the same. And it's not for our purpose, it's for our residents' purpose. It's for their tax bill purpose. It's to lower it to a point to where it looks like we're working for them as well. I don't look at it because it's going to help get me the next position of whatever I'm looking for, or anybody on this board. We're doing it for the residents and for whatever savings that offers them. Trustee Kaminsky last time.
Okay, and this is also why we got into so much trouble with our water bills. We decided, oh, we can't raise those bills over the past decade. Oh, we can't do that. Well, maybe if we had taken those incremental increases and had thought further ahead, we wouldn't have been in a position of having to raise them by 80%. To me, this is the same thing when we go for a zero budget, rather than chipping away at all the other parking lot items on here. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And parking lot items are wish lists that it's up to us to pick and choose. Yeah, they're all part of what's
And all-
either needed or not needed. and
All
we choose
essential,
which we
if not
want to
this
fund
year.
and which we don't want to
They're
fund.
coming back next year, and it's gonna be a bigger
Absolutely.
ticket.
And we have to make those same choices based on what we have monies available and what our increase or available revenues are, as we do every year. And it never will go away, ever. And there'll always be road repair, and there'll always be parking lots that need replacing. But at the same time, it's up to us as stewards to try to hold that taxes to a point that it makes sense for our residents. And when they need help, in years that they need help, after the cuts that they've seen in their salaries or the increase in costs, if they've seen through inflation, maybe we could step up in one year that we don't have to put the increase that we've always put on in the previous 2 or 3 years, which we've gone to the max on every time in the last 3 years. Maybe this time we don't.
I
For that
guarantee you
reason,
It will be max next year.
Trustee Pieper.
I am definitely not against hiring more police officers. If that's what you're saying you need, I'm definitely for that and trying to figure out a way to get there. In the meantime, I really would love to see what the cost savings would be. I know it would be great cost savings for the village if we did move dispatching to centrally located at Washington County. I know that it would be cost savings for there. That could maybe free up funds to hire 1, 2, maybe even all 3 of the officers. In addition, I would love to see what these resource officers could do to potentially free up some of the officers that you want to put on patrol. I don't know how much those resource officers cost. I would,
CSOs, you mean?
or yeah, the community.
Whatever they are.
Yeah, you were saying resource officer, and that
Sorry,
more, it could be
CS.
confused with what we have at the high school and middle school.
Yeah, I would love to see what the CSOs would have to offer to maybe free up some other officers' time. In the meantime, I would love to see you get there. I would just love to see what we can do in the meantime, look at to try to get some cost savings to get you them.
Yeah, and the dispatch is that's all very dependent on what services you want to continue to offer. When I talked to Menominee Falls, there wasn't a savings because when they took dispatchers and they just basically replaced them with clerks to do all the other stuff that the dispatchers were. So it all depends on what model you're looking at, what the residents expect from our police department, what services we're still able to provide. So I think that's a really discussion. It's hard to
Trustee Ball.
We did this with the fire department many years ago. Wasn't during a hectic construction boom like we have now. We've got all the stuff going up at Holy Hill Road, got all the residential that's coming in now. I don't recall when we staged the fire department over many years, all that going on. So I think there's a difference when we start talking about how to fund the police department as to what we did in the fire department. I would not want to see this take 3 years, 3, 4, 5 years to get 3 more officers, because in 3, 4, 5 years, I'm going to need 6 officers over that time if the village continues to grow the way it's growing now. So I'd like to find a different way to do it other than waiting.
As my memory serves me, the first, I think, members of the fire department that we added, we floated in a similar way, where we used some surplus, and we knew that within the next budget year, we'd have to cover it, and find the funds to cover it. And that comes to memory for me, and I think there's other on this board that remember that as well. That's why, from what Terry had said, or Trustee Kaminsky had said in regards to finding the funds for an additional officer this year, I wouldn't be against knowing that we would start and have to recoup about $118,000 next year in different areas of the budget to maintain that officer and look for ways to add an additional officer. When you're talking about public safety and the protection of the residents, it's always the first and foremost priority for a person's property taxes. Those are things that we need to step up to and look for ways to fund and support. When your police chief comes forward and is making a plea based on what he sees on calls and increase in calls, it's time for us to step up and to meet that request. Jan Miller.
We just had the public safety meeting, and Chief Snow came to us, and they have been very proactive in getting the flock cameras. We started out saying maybe you could get away with 3, now we're up to 6. They went out proactively, got extra funding, grants. They also got a grant for a drone. This community is, as we heard from the county supervisor, the fastest growing village in the county. And with that comes extra crime. So I do want to protect our citizens, and I think that we should do something today to start. And I agree with Trustee Kaminsky.
Trustee Myers,
I make a motion that we use $107,000 for one extra police officer.
plus,
Plus, you need more money.
Excuse me?
You
need more money. Where would you want to take the additional, what is it, 11,000?
How much money we have that we have not used on roads from the county transfer from Goldendale?
What's the question,
No.
Trustee Myers?
Take
He's got a question, he has the floor. I'm sorry,
He knows what I'm saying for.
I balance of $640,000 or $680,000 fund. But also just if offer for the board that if the position was funded at $107,000, 118 is the cost for a full year. It would likely take us a month or so to get the position filled, the personnel. 7,000 would be, it's not the full year cost, but it would be adequate for us to get the position, get someone hired and slot during next year. Out an ongoing source of funding for the position in future.
And my motion to go along with that, actually, I like your number better, 600,000, because I remember 592, 528 is the one number I think that Matthew has given to me just recently. But whatever. They're both good numbers.
Trust his memory more than mine.
Anyhow,
that is your motion, did we?
my motion would be that we take the 107,000, and keeping in mind what our administrator said, that if we can maybe fund it, maybe for 10 months, by the time we actually get somebody in there as such, it might reduce that amount from, what was it, 118, Dean?
The amount for the full year, I believe, is listed on our sheets here as 118,000. We have 107, so based on when that person would be hired and go through the steps that it's necessary to bring an officer on board, it could be a couple months.
Maybe it's
February,
112,000.
March.
Anyhow, my, along with that motion would be that any money that we need additional would come from the money that we put for roads that I just
Right now,
identified.
it sounds like it won't be, so right now, your motion is to designate 107,000 for the,
But you want to know where the other money came from, so I'm telling you
Right.
in my motion where it would come from,
all right, if needed.
if needed. Yes, sir.
Is that all right with the second?
No,
Where
Not
do you
all right
want it
with the
coming
second.
from?
no, I won't take it from roads.
It's if needed.
I don't like it up.
I don't
in
want it in the motion. Get it out of the motion.
Trustee Myers, would you like
Yeah.
to remove it from the motion for the purpose of moving your motion forward? Right now, we're being told that 107 should cover it.
Steve, could we take that from reserves or general fund?
I would go with the 107.
Go with the 107.
I would,
President asked, where's the rest of the money coming
Right,
from?
but then as the administrator pointed out, because of the time it would take to bring an officer on board, 107 would probably cover it,
Good enough. I'll leave my motion as such.
as 107.
Yes, sir.
I'll second that.
That's
Thank
now
you.
the second.
Yes.
Discussion. Trustee Nyred.
I guess I'm the new kid on the block and a new member of the community here, I guess. But first of all, I'll say that I think the police and fire protection here is excellent. And I know the challenges that are faced. with the increase in population and business and whatever. But I think tonight we're going at this in the nth hour. And I would sooner, I could feel better voting on it if I was looking at statistics and to say over the last couple of years, these areas, burglary, whatever, have all increased to justify the use, the need for officers, and to come out then and say, and I agree that we should have a plan to say if 3 is what is needed, but we got to see really why it's needed and to justify it, not just, and I'm not saying you're just pulling it out of the hair. You probably know the statistics. We're just not seeing all of the statistics.
My response to you, Trustee Nyrider, would be the monthly reports that are brought forward before public safety would show those statistics.
Okay.
And where the increases are, and that's all part of your monthly reports based on where we are this year in certain, whether it's burglary or anything that has to do with the police department from last year to this year, increase in calls, certain types of increases you see in any of the break-ins or car thefts or any of that. And those are always included month to month, showing where our track was last year at this time and this year currently. So as you see those come through in your information of emails of possible future meetings, you'll always see that report there, and those types of things can be seen in that report. Have I said that correctly?
Yeah, very comprehensive. It goes into traffic crashes, things of that.
But the other area, we have the uncertainty, and yet still is and you answered it, is the dispatcher. We don't know if there could be a cost savings or if there wouldn't be. So that's a green area. So is we talked the night that the county exec was here, I think probably after he left, about the possibility of, why you're patrolling the highway. And could that be decreased as well? So, I mean, I think there's still some variables in here to say we need 2, we need 3, we need 4. And I like to say a plan that says, based on all of this, we're going to try and get 1 in next year, 1 or all 3 in next year. Personally, I wouldn't like to see it go to a referendum. I think we might be surprised where that ends up. But I'd rather see an overall plan here. I just think tonight we're just kind of kicking at nth hour and just grabbing here.
Further discussion. Trustee Rick Miller.
So a couple things. First off, I think the phase-in plan is probably the best one for someone who started when we started with a referendum for the fire department and was unsuccessful. I think the way that we approached that afterwards was pretty good. We got the fun. It wasn't exactly on the timeline that everybody wanted, but we did get it done. Second off, if I recall, in order to get that new command structure from lieutenants to sergeants, that was going to be done by attrition. That doesn't happen overnight. That takes a little bit of time in order to, have some retirements or people leave, et cetera, et cetera. So if I remember, you're not looking at this right now, you're looking at it over time and change that command structure a little bit on that side. The other thing is that you had mentioned that there is some possible funding that is available, which is phased out over the years in order to get the officer.
Yeah, we were told we would hear those announcements at the beginning of September, and they still have not posted the announcements, but those are the COPS grants.
So that's an unknown. However,
That
we
is an unknown.
we could see some savings there in that.
Correct. They would pay 75% of that salary the first year, 50, 25 the third year, and then you would be expected to fund that officer moving forward.
So we may not have to use the entire 107. I like the allocation of that for this year and take it out of one-time funds. I get that. That could be an issue. However, that question about dispatch, the other questions, you've got a year to decide and figure that out. And we may be able to get some savings in 22 that way and fund this.
Another one at least.
So, and maybe another officer, exactly. But I'm okay with one-time funds on this.
Further discussion? Trustee Kaminsky, did you have anything to add?
No, but I totally support this. And I think it's the right decision. So,
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky.
I,
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Nightrider.
No.
Trustee Peeper.
No,
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Anything else for police staffing? No?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
I-
I-
I would still, I would still like to see a long-term plan
Yes, sir.
toward where this is going. This is a one-year thing, but you're talking about a multi-year problem. This is a Band-Aid on a trend. We need to see a plan so we know what the implications are 3, 4, and 5 years down the road.
More details in the presentation shown previously and what it really breaks down through attrition?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think trustee Nightrider is right on the money. So I understand, there's more crime this year than last year. That's not a reason to add a police officer. We need to look back 3, 4, and 5 years and see what those trends are over a longer period of time. So we get this right.
I agree.
Understood.
Thank you. Next items are parking lot, I'm sorry, trustee Myers.
Correct. The annual report yeah, it could. It certainly could. Our operating system has the capacity to figure that out over the life of that system, so.
All right, anything else for police staffing? If not, we can go to parking lot issues or other budget issues. Well, we can start with parking lot issues. Much? It's listed on the agenda. We should still go through it. If not, so what we're saying is, we're not looking to address any parking lot issues based on the motions done previously. Correct? All right. Other budget issues? No other budget issues. Please note, we will be going through the public hearing portion at the next meeting for the budget as it was presented publicly, but also from the changes that were made tonight as well. As requested by our village administrator, if anyone's looking to make wide, varied changes to the budget, it would be, now would be the time, rather than trying to prepare for that at the time of the meeting where it would then have to be either delayed as to what the final budget is, or a lot of other things that need to be reworked. We've gone through 4 meetings now for budget, and have, I think, effectively come up with a good levy and a good plan to cover some of the parking lot issues and some of the issues as presented. We know there's always work to do and more that can be covered, but at the same time, we are also restricted by state statutes as to how much of that can be increased, and it's up to us to look at where those costs are planned for, where they're placed, and where the future plan brings us so that we can do the best to provide the services that our residents expect for their property taxes. Anything else in regards to budget? If not, trustee Dan Miller, do the first wrap.
Got in under the line. Did the 2020 year-end surplus, 267, include was that a total of the other two lines above that? I think it was page 3. You know, the other funds available?
No, that number is a standalone number from,
So what you're telling me is that the property insurance savings monies are available?
No, the board, it's the remainder of those to bring the levy down to 0.
Okay, okay. Just wanted clarification.
Anything else, trustee Miller?
No, that was my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, then if there's nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned. We'll wait just a couple minutes before we start the village board meeting. Turn off your microphones, please.